Pyrrho of Elis lived in the Peloponnese from roughly 365 to 275 BCE. During his life, he traveled with Alexander the Great to India, returned to Greece to develop a highly specific worldview, and attracted enough local celebrity to be appointed high priest of his city. Despite initiating one of the two major traditions of skeptical thought in the Greco-Roman world, Pyrrho presents a problem for historians. He never wrote a single philosophical text. This timeline illustrates the exact four-step chain required to access his thoughts. We have to rely on unwritten ideas conveyed to his disciple Timon, whose resulting poetry was summarized centuries later by the Aristotelian philosopher Aristocles, whose summary was eventually quoted verbatim by the 4th century Christian bishop Eusebius. This convoluted game of historical telephony strips away nuance and context. We are left with fragments, second-hand reports, and biographical anecdotes of doubtful reliability. Because of this extreme source decay, any attempt to interpret the founder of Greek skepticism has to rely almost entirely on a single surviving block of quoted text. That text is known as the Aristocles passage. Scholars widely agree that this summary is the indispensable centerpiece for understanding Pyrrho's actual ideas. Centuries after his death, later thinkers like Sextus Empiricus built an entire intellectual movement around his legacy. They called themselves Pyrrhonists, and they positioned him as their founding inspiration. This later Pyrrhonist movement defined skepticism in a highly specific way. It required a complete suspension of judgment regarding the true underlying nature of reality. But a close philological reading of the Aristocles passage reveals a tension. The evidence suggests Pyrrho may not have been a skeptic in the later sense at all. He may have been a dogmatic metaphysician making concrete claims about how the universe actually works. To determine what Pyrrho actually believed, we have to treat Timon's summary like a logical proof. The passage promises happiness to those who can answer 3 sequential questions. This diagram shows the exact structure of the inquiry. To achieve a good life, a person must ask, first, what are things like by nature? Second, how should we be disposed toward them? And third, what will be the outcome of that disposition? The entire logical chain depends on the answer to the first question, regarding the nature of things. Pyrrho answers this by assigning 3 specific Greek epithets to the world. The first is adiaphora. This translates to indifferent or undifferentiable, meaning things either possess no distinct features or we simply cannot discern them. The second is astathmeta. This means unstable or unmeasurable. The third is anapikrita, meaning indeterminate or indeterminable. These 3 words form the primary axiom of his philosophy. Every action he takes and every rule he prescribes flows directly from this specific description of reality. The problem for historians is the inherent ambiguity of the grammar. The dual translations of these 3 specific terms fracture the historical record into 2 incompatible versions of Pyrrho. The first interpretation is metaphysical. In this reading, the Greek words describe the objects in themselves. Pyrrho is making a positive, definitive claim that reality is objectively featureless and in a constant state of flux. The second interpretation is epistemological. If these words describe our cognitive limits instead of the objects, the meaning shifts entirely. The universe might have fixed characteristics, but human sensory faculties are structurally incapable of measuring or determining them. This second reading aligns closely with the later skeptic tradition of Sextus Empiricus, where the philosopher refrains from making any absolute claims about the world. The distinction dictates Pyrrho's entire identity. It is the difference between declaring the universe itself is a blur and admitting that your eyesight is failing. To resolve this, scholars look to the very next line of the text, which connects the nature of reality to the unreliability of human sensations and opinions. This chart shows the logical sequence found in the surviving manuscript. The text connects the 2 concepts with the Greek phrase dia toto, meaning for this reason. This specific direction of inference forces the metaphysical reading. It argues that because reality is inherently fluid and indeterminate, our senses naturally failed to report fixed truths about it. However, some scholars argue the manuscript contains a transcription error. They propose amending the text to dia to, meaning on account of the fact that. This minor grammatical flip reverses the logic entirely, forcing the epistemological reading. It argues that on account of the fact that our senses are flawed, the true nature of reality is indeterminable. The foundational alignment of ancient skepticism, whether its creator was a dogmatist or a true skeptic, hinges on a single, disputed prepositional phrase preserved by a 4th-century bishop. Regardless of the translation, we must answer Timon's second question. Given this reality, what should our disposition be? Pyrrho mandates that we adopt a fiercely unopinionated attitude. We must refuse to trust our sensations and refuse to form dogma. In early Greek philosophy, the concept of doxa, or opinion, specifically meant accepting your everyday sensory experience as an accurate representation of absolute truth. Pyrrho demands we reject this reflex. To maintain this discipline, he prescribed a specific verbal formula. When speaking about any object, we should say that it no more is than is not, or both is and is not, or neither is nor is not. Whether the world is physically broken or our minds are cognitively broken, Pyrrho's functional output is identical, a total, uncompromising withdrawal of intellectual trust. This leads directly to the third question. What happens to the person who actually adopts this unopinionated disposition? The immediate result is aphasia. Aphasia is a state of non-assertion, or literal speechlessness. It is a strict refusal to commit to definite alternatives about the world. This initial silence paves the way for the ultimate objective, ataraxia, meaning freedom from worry or profound tranquility. The psychological mechanism is highly efficient. By stripping away the belief that external states of affairs are inherently good or bad, meaning the mind is no longer violently pulled by desires to acquire things or by fears of avoiding them, this raises a practical problem. If you withdraw all trust in your senses and hold zero opinions about reality, how do you cross a busy street, eat a meal, or survive without accidentally walking off a cliff? This flowchart maps out the proto-Pyrrhonist operating system known as the criterion of action. You act based purely on how things seem. You follow everyday appearances, bodily habits, and societal conventions. You simply maintain a strict internal firewall against believing that these useful appearances reflect how things really are. The historical record confirms he applied this system rigorously. Contemporaries noted his legendary, almost ascetic impassivity to the physical world. Anecdotes report that his emotional baseline was so detached he could endure the horrific techniques of ancient surgery without flinching. Later skeptics maintained their tranquility through constant, exhausting intellectual debate, pitting their opposing arguments against one another indefinitely. Pyrrho bypassed this entirely. His piece flowed from a definitive conclusion about the limits of human access to truth. Whether he was a radical metaphysician asserting the fluidity of nature, or an epistemologist recognizing the boundary of human cognition, the result was the same. Pyrrho engineered a philosophical algorithm that directly converted intellectual surrender into lasting psychological peace.